Dog control orders can either be made by primary authorities, which in England means district councils, or borough councils, county councils where there's no district council, and of course specifically London borough councils, or by secondary authorities, which in England really means parish councils. I'm not aware of any parish council actually having made any, but it's possible. A secondary authority, so that's parish, can't make a DCO if the primary authority, so the district or borough council, has already made a DCO for that same offence for the same land. And if a primary authority chooses to make a DCO, any existing DCO that had been made by the secondary authority will lapse if it's for the same offence and for the same land. As to the procedure for making a dog control order, well, it's a balancing act between those who own dogs and those who might otherwise be affected by dogs, and they of course may be dog owners themselves. The authority has to be able to show that the order is a necessary and proportionate response to problems. They have to balance the interests of dog owners and those in charge of dogs against the interests of those who may be affected by the activities of dogs. And they've got to consider how easy a dog control order will be to enforce. There's no point making a dog control order if you haven't got the capacity to go out and enforce it. The procedure is that firstly there has to be consultation between the primary authority and the secondary authority. There then has to be a notice published in a local newspaper, and members of the public are invited to make representations. And believe me, they will make representations on both sides, those very much for, those very much against, those feeling that it should go further, those feeling that it should be much reduced, if you have them at all. The notice has to identify the land concerned, has to summarise the nature of the order that you're considering making. Where the order refers to a map, you have to say where that map can be inspected. It has to give an address for representations, and it has to be put in the paper at least 28 days after publication. That didn't make sense at all. You have to give them at least 28 days after publication to make representations. That makes more sense. Right, you then have to consider the representations. It doesn't mean you have to do as you ask, but you certainly have to consider what's being suggested by the public. And if you choose to proceed with making the order, then it can't come into force for at least 14 days after you've made that decision that it will come into force. Then at least 7 days before then, you have to publish a further notice in a local newspaper to say that the order has been made, and where people can see it and take copies. Where practicable, also make sure it's on the authority's website, and where practicable you should put signs where the dog control orders are to apply. As I said earlier, they're usually enforced by fixed penalty notices. Fixed penalty notices are discretionary, although you have to have regard to any internal policy you may have as to when you would offer a fixed penalty notice and when you would otherwise prosecute. The amount of the fixed penalty notice is set when the dog control order is made, and currently can be anywhere between £50 and £80. Wales, ooh, they like it, the jackpot. They can make it anywhere between £75 and £150. So England, because I appreciate I'm only talking to my Gatwick delegates, £50 to £80, and almost every authority has gone for the top of the scale, so £80. Where it isn't fixed and under the DCO, then default setting is £75. You're entitled to offer a discount for early payments, but you're not allowed to reduce that to any less than £50, and you're not obliged to offer a discount for early payments. The fixed penalty notice has to state the full amount of the penalty, state that no proceedings will be issued if paid within 14 days, must give the name and address for payment, and specify the order that created the offence. If somebody fails to pay the fixed penalty notice, or if you've chosen not to issue the fixed penalty notice, then you can prosecute for the offence. That's the offence of the breach of the dog control order. It's a summary only offence. Be careful of that, because it's 6 months from the breach of the dog control order, not 6 months from the failure to pay the FPN. Okay, that's rattled you through dog control orders. It's amazing how quickly I can get this done without Limit interruptions. Very good. Although my phone would probably ring in a minute. We want to be calling or something. Right, let's briefly run you through noise nuisance as well. It is a fact that dogs bark, and there is no law that can possibly say that dogs aren't allowed to bark. The problem is that on the other side, everybody has the right to peaceably enjoy their home, free from interference from barking dogs. So it's a balancing act. There's conflicting rights. There's the dog owner, and then there's the neighbour that wants the quiet. These conflicting rights have to be balanced by law. And quite when a barking dog becomes an actionable nuisance isn't always easy to establish, as there is no one single measure that can tell you. It's a matter of fact and degree in each case, will depend on various things including the volume, and usually that's affected by the number of dogs. So the more dogs you have, the more likely it is that it will be a noise nuisance. Duration, so how long the dogs are barking, the longer they bark, the more likely it is that it's a noise nuisance. And the time of day. Night barking is more likely to be a nuisance because it's more intrusive compared with day barking, when it may well be that there aren't that many people around to be impacted by it. The definition of a statutory nuisance is in the Environmental Protection Act, and for noise nuisance we look at 79(1)(g), and it's frankly not the best of definitions. It frankly doesn't tell us anything. What it defines it as is noise emitted from premises so as to be prejudicial to health or a nuisance. But if you strip that down, it basically just says a noise nuisance is a noise nuisance. It doesn't help anybody. Not the most comprehensive of definitions. There's very little case law to assist, and it really is a situation that every case has to be treated on its own individual merits. Case of Godfrey and Conway Borough Council, I've given you the reference in the notes. It was held that noise can be a statutory nuisance even if it doesn't exceed the background levels of noise, if it's of a character which makes it intrusive and irritating.